officially live. Sorry for the delay, little technical difficulties as we, continue to iron out things. We're investing more and more time into Restream as the platform we're using, and there was a little hiccup there as we figure out some new seats. So thanks for, hopefully we gave you enough time to come up with some questions. That's really the whole goal of us hopping on a few minutes after the hour.
And obviously the questions are pouring in, right? From an audience that's knocking at the door.
I know, they're like,
it's like a Walmart on Black Friday. They're just right here,
just
ready to dive in.
ready to stampede each other for getting their question.
As they do, man. As they do. So it's Friday. Big
Friday.
weekend plans?
No, it's Friday.
Is it Friday?
I don't know. Well, any plans? Well, we got the Lean Startup Boot Camp tonight and tomorrow. So, more startups naturally. And then Father's Day, going to be spending some time with the family and doing that. So how about you?
Yeah. Tomorrow is my son's second birthday.
There you
So
go.
we're not doing a party or anything, but I'm sure we'll pick up a cupcake or something like that, and we might take him to the beach sometime soon. We'll see. But and then of course, Sunday is his Father's Day, and so I'm sure we'll have things. But my wife and I are planning on going on a date tonight. Got a babysitter, so.
Ooh, where are we going?
She hasn't told me. So. It's nearby, so it's going to be someplace in Roseville, or Granite Bay, or like somewhere in there. But so I don't know. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, shall we dive into some of these burning questions that we've been getting? We did get some offline per usual, so some that were even ahead of the game, not only waiting at the Walmart door, but actually pre-ordered, so they could just walk right in and not have to worry about throwing them in the chat. So maybe let's hop in and answer a few questions, and we'll keep an eye on the chat. So thanks all of you that are joining us here today.
All right, awesome. Let's start out hot.
What better way?
What better way to start out hot hot, fresh from the grab bag here, like a donut in the early morning hours. So this is from the founder of, I guess it's like a fintech tool for Gen Z that helps them with their savings habits. Not to bias things off the bat, but I've heard this pitch about 300 times. But let's not this in particular one, just yeah. Anyway, I've been hearing that since anyway, doesn't matter. Point of the story. I was gonna make a joke, but I was gonna make a joke that I've been hearing this since it was a Gen Z thing, but it's still a Gen Z thing, and now I'm hearing the Gen Alpha ones. So
just get to the question.
Here's the question. They didn't send a question. They just wanted like, what do you think of my idea? That was the question. So mission accomplished. Okay, so here is the question. We've got a few early users, but no big aha moment yet. I'm not sure exactly what they mean there. I guess we can unpack that. Should we keep iterating or pivot?
So, I mean, the first thing to me is that they haven't really set a rigid's not the right term, but they haven't set a specific structure around kind of the experiment that they're running. And so they're looking for this aha moment, which is, I'm not sure how they're even defining that, but it leads to a lot of bias, right? It was like, oh, that was interesting. And now you're kind of like, yeah, we got that aha moment. Or on the other side of it, we're never getting the aha moment when you might actually be getting some signals that there's actually something there. And so really setting up a specific, process related to experimenting and drawing that line in the sand to know if you're headed down the right path. And so you're really looking to see, does this solution, really add value and kind of have the MOGV, is that kind of the term that you use, that moment of greatest value, right? Is another way to look at that aha moment. And so I think there's ways you need to start to structure that to better extrapolate data to see if you're actually on the right track. So that's kind of like the first thing that comes to mind as I'm looking at what this founder's kind of going through was, it's always great to, at early stages, to be looking for that qualitative data, but we still have to put some structure around it to know if we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to kind of underline, what you just said here, because the question itself is sort of confessing that there's, I wouldn't use the word rigid either. I think maybe I would use
Yeah.
the word formal.
Yeah.
That there's no formal hypothesis here, and the way we know that is it's like, well, there's no aha moment. Should we pivot? Should we persevere? Keep iterating, and that all seems to me like a let's see what happens approach. Like we put out the product and we're looking to see what happens, and we're expecting something that they put it in quotes, this aha moment. Like they're expecting to see something, and it's not clear what that is. And when they see something, that they will know that they're on the right track. And there's all of that has no definition to it, and so we need to, like, traction is confirmatory data from the marketplace, right? Like that's what traction is, and you have to define a model of what success looks like that you can hypothesize against. And then as you gather data, that data is either confirming said hypothesis or not. And so at the Traction Lab, for example, we have actually a fairly formal version of this that we do. It's lightweight because we don't like to waste anybody's time. But it is a formal process of identifying this is what we're doing. It's tied to a key validation point because, hey, this is some science. We do the traction science thing here. So as you're working toward this validation point, you're trying to accumulate data. You're running experiments in order to get validated learning back. And so then you design an experiment that says, okay, we think our hypothesis is this. This is what we're going to do. Who, what, how, when, where. This is our experiment. We're going to measure this thing, and success looks like when that thing is this value, right? Is greater than or equal to this value, or less than or equal to this value, or whatever it is. And then we do it per line item, and then we measure the value that we said we were going to measure, and we see, was it over or was it under, right? Did we meet the measurement we set out to do? And if we did, that's confirmatory data. And if we did not, then we falsified our hypothesis. And so that is now not validated learning so much as it's invalidated learning. And then we say, okay, so therefore the insight that we're able to gather from running that experiment is this, and therefore that leads us to the next step. And that's just how we structure every experiment we have our founders run at the Traction Lab. So I would say, like, should we keep pivoting or should we keep iterating or pivot? Well, go back to what does success look like? And there's a lot of ways to do that, but I would look at it as a model, right? We're bringing in these customers. This is what happens when they do percent convert. You have a funnel. And then we'd say, like, what does it need to be successful? And then you can just reverse engineer from there some values that make sense. And then you can see, are we actually seeing values right now where that makes sense? And if not, then you can go back to that funnel or back to those pirate metrics, a customer factor, whatever you want to use, and then actually start to identify where is the point here where we need this to go up, where we need this conversion rate at this particular point to go up. Is it getting them to our landing page? Is it getting them to convert on our landing page, to activate once they're here, to pay, or whatever? So.
Love it. Yeah, I think the last thing, and then I'll tee you up for maybe the next question in the grab bag as we wait for some additional questions coming into the chat here, was like, really, as we think about like thinking in traction and kind of what we call like traction thinking, one of the components is, as you're coming into any of these particular types of tests, we want to identify like what is the risk that we're coming in with. What's the assumption that we're trying to test? And then as we're building this experiment, as we're translating from like, what is our model? What is the risk related to it? Is like, what is our hypothesis of success, right? And that's where you then translate your like thought process into like, here's the science of us actually gathering traction. And so as you think about like waiting for just this moment, like what was the assumption you had coming into this, and like, were you just doing this to feel good, or was this actually something really related to, I identified this risk and we're running this particular test to get that validated learning from the marketplace? So I think we sufficiently scienced the crap out of that one.
Well, so let's there's actually a question here in the grab bag that from the Greek chorus that is kind of related. So let's do this one. So this founder is working on an AI assistant, because who isn't these days, but for internal documentation. I'm assuming that that's something like at a company, that all their documentation are put behind some LLM, and so that employees can ask questions of like the employee handbook and things like that, I'm assuming. All right. So the question is this: we built something cool. Glad you think so, but we're not sure what to test first. What's the right experiment?
Whew. Well, who are you testing with, and what pain points do they have? I think it sounds like you've hopped straight into love the solution, not the problem that you're solving,
But it's
versus
cool, Cameron. They
loving
said
the.
so right here. It's
It is
cool.
cool. That's cool to you, but is it cool to your customers or anyone else, right? And so I think the biggest thing that certainly comes to mind for me was it's all the solution should be grounded in your customer and their pain points, right? You want to understand their needs, their wants, and their fears, so you can best create the solution that has the features that solve those needs, and then the value and the benefits that you're providing when you help them achieve their goals, and then the experiment or the experience that you create to alleviate any fears that they particularly have. And so from a bringing in really this traction science methodology, is we really have to go back to when we created this, what were the assumptions and foundations of the pain points that we think we were solving, and for who in these particular types of ventures. So it was, they're potentially a B2B play. Is this something that all of the employees are using? Is there a subset of them using it? Like, how is this currently being solved, and why isn't that meeting their need? And so I think I would go back to the drawing board related to the particular customer problem fit versus hopping into straight into the solution related to that. So what about you, JD, and what comes to mind for you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So first is I mean, I guess like I was gonna think of a like a either a cheeky way or a polite way to say it, but I think I'll just say like you jumped the gun. Like that's what happened here, right? So you built something cool, to Cameron's point, before you know if it's cool or not, because customers are the only people who can actually determine if the product's cool, and you're not sure what to test to first. What's the right experiment? So like this is just out of order, right? This is a build it and they will come type thing, when you should be actually saying, if they come, I will build it. So there's an innovator bias there. But as far as what you should test first, it's like, what is the problem that you're actually solving, right? So form an hypothesis around the problem that you're solving. So a particular customer that's hopefully an early adopter who experiences this problem, you think, with urgency and severity. And then the very first question is, where can you find them? Right. And so then you form an hypothesis around, how can I find these people that I think have this problem with sufficient severity and urgency, and then design an experiment to see if you can in fact find those people in a way that's cheap and efficient. And once you can find those people, then you layer on another experiment to say, do they have the problem I think that they do? Is the problem severe and urgent? And if they do are they willing to pay for a solution? And if they are, is this the way that they want the solution? And only at that point are we actually bringing in the solution that you've already put together that you think is cool. So like that's the order of things. Like if you actually can't find the people who have the problem, nothing else really matters. And if they don't have the problem you think they do, then nothing after that even matters. And if the problem is not severe and urgent enough that they're willing to pay for a solution for it, nothing else matters. And so we get so far down the line before the product actually even matters.
Right. Yeah, I'll speak to kind of a cautionary tale, and then maybe we can segue into Dennis's question in the chat. But I think like one of the things like in that process that you just mapped out, right? It's like, okay, we built something we think's cool. Let's go. We'll have to kind of go back to the drawing board, looking at this kind of customer discovery. So saying we can actually get in front of these people that we think have the problem. One of the challenges we often see is because you're so biased in the solution that you've created, you've already identified, you think that it's cool, that you then have that discovery conversation be about your solution. And so you're like validating your bias by saying, hey, do you have these problems? And they're like, yeah, that's a problem that I have. But you're not actually getting them to like self-report on that data. And so when you bring in kind of this science of actually thinking about the evidence that you're getting and the traction that you want, you can't really bias that. And so one of the things is people position that solution and say, would this solve your particular problem? And they're like, yeah, that would be something that potentially could solve my problem. And you want to try this out for free? Sure, I'll try it out for free. And then when it comes to actually ask them to pay for it, they're not willing to pay for it because they actually don't have a urgent and severe pain point that you thought they did. You've just kind of biased that conversation. And so you've gone in this whole process of not actually gathering true evidence that will allow you to validate where you're at in the startup process. So that's just the kind of cautionary tale of not taking that in a real scientific approach.
Awesome. Well, let's throw up Dennis's question here. I definitely have thoughts.
You have thoughts? What?
I know, weird, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not usually one to have strong opinions on things. All right, but Dennis's question is, what's up, guys? Happy Walmart Black Friday. Yes, thank you for beating down the door. Questions to start. If you're starting a new venture, let's say 2-3 core team members, how would you set up the equity split while still leaving room in the on the cap table for investors or advisors? And then there's a follow-up. So we'll get to the follow-up in just a second. So my first thoughts on this are, you're probably going to want to go against your gut, or what most people's gut is here. Like I would avoid an equal split because it's almost never what makes sense. If there's truly like equal effort, equal commitment, equal contribution, then okay. But it's usually not, right? So it starts to feel fair at the beginning, but it isn't really long term. I think very fair. And your second question is on trends, so I'll come back to some of the models that are getting really, really common that I actually am a big fan of, for how to do that. But I would say start with the assumption that it's not going to be an equal split, because that usually doesn't make sense, and it usually sets up some perverse incentives. So it should be fair, right? But fair is probably unequal. Right. I just want to throw that out there. Standard. I'm not giving you legal advice here, but I will say it's very standard and advisable to have a vesting structure. So it's usually 3 or 4 years with a 1-year cliff. So if you have a divorce along the way from your co-founders, they don't take half the company with them as alimony, and so that's just par for the course. It's not about mistrust. Like vesting isn't about mistrust. It's actually about the journey. It's the startup equivalent of a prenup, right? To your other part about leaving room, it's I think 10 to 15% is usually pretty standard, and that'll cover future hires, advisors, and it can be, and that's what you call an option pool. 10 to 15% in there, leaving room for early investors. They want an option pool in place before they invest. But that they're not necessarily taking equity from the option pool. That's not how it usually works. Yeah, so they're actually going to dilute down your equity, the founder equity, in order to invest. So it's not like you're taking a set amount of equity in your company and setting it aside for investors. You're setting aside the option pool for employees, advisors, that kind of thing, and then investors will just dilute you out or down. Hopefully, you don't dilute yourself out, because then I've seen that cap table before. I don't recommend it.
And you're not likely to get investment if they see you don't own really any of the company, because that's a huge risk for them. So that's definitely something.
Yeah. So Cameron, I'll flip it over to you before we get to
the
follow-up.
I don't want to, no reason to hit too much of it on the head again. Agree with everything you've shared. Just double underline on the comment on vesting, and really thinking of that as a good tool for kind of your commitment long term. Also recognizing as you bring on investors, sometimes even at the seed series A, they might want an additional set of vesting for you having that additional commitment to seeing it through, particularly if it's still at that kind of founder led component of things. It's really relied on the team. That sometimes could be an ask that investors have as well, that you start to have that vesting process as well. And so again, that's a signal that you're you're committed to the venture versus just like you have the equity straight off and someone goes another way because of a life change that then you don't lose that going forward. So
Awesome. So we can't show the rest of Dennis's comment here. It's going to cut it off, but I'll read it. So he said, follow up to this. Are you seeing any new trends happening for traditional equity split models? Thanks and peace is what he says. So yes, and these have been like trending in this direction for a long time. So this is not brand new, but this is what I teased in the early part, is that like we're moving away from, as an industry, that like splitting equally to splitting rationally, I think is how I would describe it. And there's different models that you can use for that, like safe equity calculators and so forth. But the one that I'm a big fan of for when you're just getting started with a venture is called the slicing pie. And I can send you, if you hit me up, Dennis, I'll send you a template that you can use for it. It's a little Google sheet. But basically you're taking, you can go through this process where everybody ranks what they think is important for the company. And so that's like step number one, is here are the things that are important to the company, and then how important are they? So you start slicing the pie in terms of percentages, like this is 20% important to the company, this is 3% important to the company, whatever. You kind of break that out. And then second to that, you each rank each other on and yourselves, of course, on how much each of you contribute to each of those buckets. And then and there's some tough conversations that happen as part of that, as you go to achieve consensus around each of those percentages. Then once you have consensus around those, it's math. So this is 50% important to our company, and therefore, and you are 25, and you are like, providing 50% of that strength to this. Therefore, 25% of the company must go to you, right? And so it becomes very very rational at the end of the day, and you've agreed to it in steps, as opposed to starting from a perspective of we're splitting this equally. So we even science that at the Traction Lab, and like I would think about all of these like equity strategies and hypothesis too. You're betting on roles, you're betting on contributions, you're betting on future needs, and so like proportion those bets to the evidence that you actually have, and don't make those decisions based on vibes. That's just getting yourself into trouble. Document it, revisit it, adjust it as it's necessary, but don't wing it just because the vibes feel good. Those vibes are gonna change over time. Last couple things I think are trends. I am seeing, like, because there's a lot more deep tech these days because of AI and so forth. Technical co-founders have larger equity shares than they used to. Just on average, I think I've seen that be a thing. And then Cameron mentioned before, something that I think is becoming much more common for VCs to poke at, which is those tourist founders. The ones that don't have enough equity to make it interesting at all for that founder. And so like, it's just getting weird. So I would say that. And then also there's some shifts in how you compensate advisors as well. Everybody's worried about ghost advisors, like you get them on, they have some small piece of the cap table, 0.5%, 1%, something like that. And, they're just kind of there on the cap table, but they're not really providing any substantive value to the company. So like shifting that over to agreements that have milestones and things like that are often something that I see as well. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Cameron.
No, I think just maybe like thinking of it as an opportunity to flex your muscle as a team to have difficult conversations. Like that's only going to help you all going forward, particularly as you have to make challenging decisions about the evidence you're getting from the marketplace, or is this signal what we think it is, right? And so you're starting to build that muscle as a team to, one, look at data, but then also have a conversation around it to then make decisions. So just kind of bringing it up a level is like not just to, like, as JDM said, just go on vibes, but really flexing those muscles and try to really bring a science and evidence to the core of how you make every decision. Like that builds the culture of how you ultimately build things going forward. So that's just the maybe higher level thought that I wanted to bring in.
Yeah, I love that, because one of the things that I used to talk a lot more about when I spent a lot of time talking about the metacognition of entrepreneurship, and I it's still like if infused in everything that I do and everything that we do at the Traction Lab, right? Like it's still there. I just don't talk about it as much. But one of the things that I used to talk about a lot was culture, because there comes a point in a startup's life, particularly as they're growing, like say Series A kind of stage, where culture suddenly becomes important, as if it wasn't before. But that usually means, oh, we have a problem in our culture. So culture suddenly become important. Then you bring on these hires that are like, I'm the head of people and culture, as if culture is just something you can hire somebody to fix. And one of the things that is important to like call out is that culture is just the sum total of every decision you've made to date. Like that's it. That's all
Yep.
culture is. And so if you think about the weight of all the decisions that you made, at some point, you're like, oh, we need to change the culture. Therefore, we have to make different decisions. But keep in mind that you had so many decisions that led up to that culture that you have to make a lot of decisions to start changing that into a different direction. And a lot of decisions doesn't mean a lot of change. It means those that has to be reflected in the decisions that you're making over time. And so culture can be a really, really hard thing to shift. So culture has to start early on, and culture starts way earlier than you think it does. Culture starts with a solo founder when they're just early getting started, and all we were talking about this in the
They're
sense of like
building
venture
something
science here.
cool. It's
But
something cool, you know? They're
well, I
going on.
mean,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you want to to create, do that from day one, even when you're by yourself, because that will be the culture that exists when you have two people, and the culture that you have when you have two people will be the culture that you have when you have three people, or at least we'll see the roots of that culture, is what I guess I should say. But
I love it.
all right. Well, we did get a nice compliment from Yanni here. Happy with the zero to traction.
Cool.
Thanks, Yanni, for listening. We dropped this episode a couple days late this week, but
Okay.
but we got it out, and you liked it, so a gold star to us. And thank you for your service. So yes, we're
So
here. We're
I'll
here for
share a
founders.
funny. So I was at an event last night, and I'll call him out. But Brian Hoblet, he was a mentor for our last startup challenge, and he now works for CTW and is leading kind of a new branch called Capital Markets for that firm. But I had shared, I think I invited him to follow the Zero to Traction. And he's someone who, like, we have a good relationship, and like always will razz me on certain things. And he's like, "Hey, I got to tell you, your podcast, I really wanted to, make fun of you about it, but man, it was really good. I have nothing to, basically pull apart." He's like, I really enjoyed all the episodes. You guys have really good relationship, and so he's like, I'm looking forward to the next episode. So I was like, sweet. He couldn't even like pick apart anything, which like usually he would do that. So I was like, all right, we're rocking and rolling. So for those that don't subscribe to Zero Traction, check it out. It's our weekly podcast that drops, and this week we dove into fuel or fool. So check it on out. But so thank you, Yanni, for the thumbs up there as well. So should we dig down deep into the grab bag, or
let's reach back in. So I decided to throw them on screen. There's no reason I can't copy and paste.
Yeah, cool.
All right. So this is from an early stage SaaS for HR teams. So cool, B2B, like it. We're stuck choosing between two target segments. Should we experiment with both or just pick one? Okay. So I love this question. Thank you so much for asking this question. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because it's the thing that most founders end up getting tripped up on. And it's just a question of how long do you stay tripped up by the thing, right? So it's like this embarrassment of riches. Like, we've got customer segments, we're getting positive vibes from both. And so, oh, this is awesome, we're on the right track or whatever. And there's actually two ways that startups eventually get stuck. So like they'll in both cases, they have revenue, it's great, and like the revenue's growing a little bit, it's awesome, and then revenue will kind of stagnate, or it'll grow but kind of grow linearly. And so we're like, and that's not enough, right? We're not seeing enough traction. And one can just be because the customer segment was wrong, but the other one was because we had too many customer segments, so there's no repeatability across the customer segments, right? So it's this lack of focus problem that causes you to not be able to scale. And so, like, is having too many like potential customers a problem? Yes, it is a problem. So I love this question, Cameron. How are you thinking about this problem?
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Well, sorry, I got a little distracted because you brought up vibes and it started making me think about Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch of Good Vibrations. So I was kind of singing the song in my head. I was trying to see if I could pull it up there, but
So
I
wait,
think. Go ahead.
but see, no. So like, I told you literally just the other day that Brian Wilson died this week, and your mind goes to Marky Mark's Good Vibrations and not the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations.
Well, it was one of my good buddies' walk-up songs when he would pitch. So I think of that. That's what comes to mind.
Okay, for our audience here, pitch in baseball, not pitch's startup.
Yes, this is true. This is true. Sorry. Yeah, there's no walk-up music when you're pitching your startup. Maybe that could be something that
But
we bring.
bunch of founders out there like, wait, I'm supposed to have walk-up music? I mean, yes, but
sorry, I was a little distracted in
no,
my
that's
head
right.
there, but yeah. So I mean, I think as you're looking at the two different segments, should we experiment with both or just pick one? I think again, it goes to creating that formal process of like what is truly the signal that you're looking for, and I think the biggest thing is like who has the greater urgency and severity related to the problem space. And so what would be that right signal for you to know which one of these segments has a greater pain point and has a more urgent pain point related to what you're trying to solve. So that's where my mind would ultimately go. So framing in terms of gathering that traction science and setting up an experiment. The risk is ultimately you don't want to go for both because you're going to divide and divide your resources up and not really properly wedge into the market. And so amongst those two signals that you're getting, how can you find evidence that will allow you to make that decision in a calculated way? And I would tie that really to one, the problem, but really connecting that to that quadrant of both urgent and severe, because that's going to be truly who your early adopter is.
Yeah, I think there's some practical decisions here and there's some strategic ones, right? But they're both data driven. So to your point, so like the practical decision is like, okay, so we have let's just say it's two customer segments because that's what the questioner said. Oftentimes I hear this with 3, 4, 5, 6 customer segments, and we're just compounding the problem at this point. But like when you have those different customer segments, the reason we end up with a lack of focus is because that customer segment really early on ends up making a lot of decisions for you. Let me say that again. The customer segment you go for ends up making a lot of decisions for you. So what's important in the product? What's less important in the product? Which features get prominence versus are relegated to menus that you have to dig for? What you see when you first log in, the marketing language on a landing page, how you respond in on the customer success or customer service side, like all of that is determined by the customer segment. And so as you start servicing more than one, you're creating a chaos machine.
Right.
And that's where you end up serving neither of them well because you're not focused on any one of them. And when you're an early stage startup, you just don't have the resources to let's put a team on this and a team on that, and we'll call it good, right?
Yeah. Can I kind of go on that example? Like we've been seeing this where it's like, oh, we're running 2 pilots with 2 different customers, and they're then asking for different features to be added into the fundamental technology that's created. And so what then happens is you have these bifurcated solutions, and so you're actually just making customized solutions for a variety of different customers, which isn't repeatable, right? And so if you're truly trying to build a repeatable, scalable venture, you need to really wedge in with that specific customer that you can get into the market and get in front of in a repeatable fashion and then ultimately grow with, versus it'd be if you're running a services-based company and want to grow and have an awesome venture, you could certainly do that more customized approach, but that's not going to lead to the scalability that you're ultimately trying to if you're trying to be venture backable.
Yes, agreed. And so back to what I was talking about before I took us on a tangent, a valuable tangent, but I took us on a little bit of a tangent here.
We'll let the audience say if it was valuable, but I'm just kidding.
No, I think it's pretty cool. So I think what we said was pretty cool.
No, I agree.
So, like, there's the practical side of the decision, there's the strategic side of the decision. So the practical side, like because of that focus, right, having making decisions for you, right, we have to think about what the practical implications of that are, as well as the strategic implications. So, on the practical implications, Cam, you said the most important one is like, which one is it easier to get? Like, if one of these customers is really hard to get with really long sales cycles, and one of them is easier to get with short sales cycles, all things being equal, that decision makes itself, right? But we can bring in some other strategic aspects to this decision as well, like which one is a better wedge into the market, or which one is going to better position us long term against our competitors. And so there's some of those strategic choices that get made there as well. But all of those are still evidence-based decisions, and none of these are actually based on vibes. And if you have trouble getting out of vibes and saying, like, I don't know how to pick one based on the data, all the data looks the same, then my response is going to be, then you're not asking the right questions. Right? You're not asking the questions that actually differentiate the two choices in front of you. And so you're getting the same data back from both of them and are not successfully differentiating them. And that is a really hard thing to do sometimes, particularly when you have a lack of data, which is again why like the science-based part of this becomes really important, because the more that you think in terms of data, the more data you're going to actually gather. And then the more data you have available to you to make those kinds of decisions or to do that kind of differentiation. So I will pause there since Cameron yawned.
No, I didn't want to. I coughed, but no, I think we've sufficiently tackled this one for sure. So I think going back to, for me, the biggest thing is running a specific experiment related to identifying what those particular pain points are and who has the urgency and severity, and can you get in front of in a more efficient fashion.
Cool. So should we do another one?
Cool. I don't know if there was one in the chat if you wanted to. It was specific to you. So.
Oh my!
Oh,
all right.
no, those are never good. And I'll say, hey, Ramesh, we went to the University of Queensland together, so tuning in from Australia. So thanks for hopping on in, and good to see you. Hope all is well.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Never apologize for asking us and ask us anything format. Love that you asked a question, and I like that something that I said caused you to think about something and kind of push back a little bit. So I love everything about that. All right, so why do I think culture is more important foundation for startup, even if we accomplish it solo? Could you please explain precisely? Yes. So couple of things come to mind here for me. So one is you're not going to be solo forever. In what you're doing, even if the point at which you're no longer solo is the point at which you're just involving a lot of customers in the process, and like culture bleeds through externally to the company as well. So you can't stay solo forever, and the patterns and behaviors and practices that we put into place when we're by ourselves are determining how we're going to behave with other people. So this came up in the context of Cameron talking about like venture science, so I'll use that example. So if you are, when you're solo, just making decisions based on vibes, and then you bring in a co-founder, and now you two are trying to make a decision together, you're going to make that decision based on vibes too, because that's the motion, that's the momentum that we have moving in that direction. And then when you add new employees, that's going to be the case too. Whereas if you are in this pattern of actually looking at this from a data-driven perspective, you're like, I have this, and that's what comes to that conversation. It also impacts whoever you bring into the conversation later, because now you're going to be in the interview process. If you're doing a hire, for example, you're going to be using all of that past knowledge, all of that past experience, and all of those practices and cultural things that you've been doing as part of the process. And you're not going to hire somebody who's vibes based if you're data based. A more like traditional example would be like some of the chaos factor shit, right? And so like let's just say you're like one of those startups on the negative side of move fast and break things. Right, there's a good side of that, and like there's a bad side of that, and like oftentimes the bad side uses this like as a excuse for just being chaotic and like jerking their employees around and like constantly changing everything, like a squirrel, or like a dog seeing a squirrel kind of thing, and just absolutely no focus at all. Like, well, we move fast and break things, so we're pivoting constantly and doing all this. like that causes a lot of chaos for employees. And so then you get this perspective amongst this culture over time of your employees, of your co-founders, of even customers at the end of the day, of like that we are not strategic, that we are not calculating, that we are fly by the seat of our pants, that we move on whims, and that nothing is really certain, and we operate in this environment of uncertainty by strategy, right? Almost, and that creates a bad experience for employees. That creates a bad experience for customers, and so, but that starts all the way back when you're by yourself. Again, how are you making like decisions? Are you constantly jerking around and going in a different direction? It's not going to suddenly stop just because somebody's brought in later on. And so like even if you're just solo, just by yourself, and have no intention of ever engaging with anyone else in the world ever again, you're off in Plato's cave and everything's like hunky-dory for you. Like even in that context, like the culture, quote unquote, would not be the word that we would use, but you're just reinforcing your own behaviors and habits and your own psychology for how you're engaging with your startup and how you're engaging with the world. And so I would say then, in that context, like be what you want to be, how you want the world to see you, and be how you want to engage with the world. I don't know if that helps or if that kind of takes it off on the wrong track, but
no, I think that made sense. I think the only thing I would add, and I know the question wasn't targeted towards me, but I think oftentimes we like think of it, particularly in the startup culture, and you see this oftentimes presented in like movies and shows, right? It's about the like table tennis and beer and all that stuff. Like that's the culture versus it being really what we're kind of talking about is really the components around making decisions. And so like what behaviors are you rewarding within your venture? And that starts with you, of like how you make those initial decisions. And so is that something, for us, we really focus on this concept of traction science. And so everything being data-based and informed by actually evidence from the marketplace, and having specific experiments in this formal process of how we gather that evidence and then make decisions related to it, versus just, sometimes, yes, you do make gut decisions, but having evidence behind it to ultimately make those decisions going forward. And so that's really what we're diving into, less on kind of just the, outside thing of like, ping pong and co-working spaces. So good question.
awesome.
I love it.
Awesome,
the follow-up.
awesome question.
And glad you're tuning in. So good to see you.
All right, Cameron, for what might be our last question, either our last question or our penultimate question from the grab bag, at least.
Yeah, I think last from the grab bag. If we do get one in the in the chat, happy to hang on and answer that. So
I'm going to give you a choice.
Ooh.
Do you want an early stage customer discovery question, or do you want a startup that's further along momentum question?
I felt like most of ours have been on the discovery early stage. So let's switch it up and go a little bit later.
All right, here we go. All right, so this is some type of marketplace or market network for local creatives. So I'm guessing it's a multi-sided market here. All right, they are 3 months in and feel like it's not moving fast enough. How do we measure momentum?
3 months in, moving fast enough. How do I measure momentum? Well, so I like, it's kind of an interesting question in terms of you're saying you're not moving fast enough, but how do I measure momentum? So how do you know you're not moving fast enough or you're moving too slowly? So like, it's again, like, what is the metric that you're looking at that's not moving fast enough? Is that revenue, which is usually a lagging indicator, which demonstrates how you did yesterday versus what you're going to be doing necessarily tomorrow? And so if there's, as we talk about this like engine for growth, I'd really be focused on measuring some of those key indicators. We talk about like this, the customer factory or the pirate metrics, and really thinking about like, what are some of those really crucial metrics that you're ultimately needing to do in order to increase throughput of customers related to that. So I think it's not necessarily just one measurement, but looking across your pirate metrics to see which lever do you need to pull to actually increase that momentum. So is it getting more people, of the right people, into the top of the funnel, or is it actually converting from when they activate and get connected to your venture, that you then properly turn on the revenue aspect to it? But I think some peeling apart of in terms of their pirate metrics and kind of customer factory would help provide some insight into where that throughput's getting stuck, and then what lever and experiment can we run to try something different to open up that spigot to get more throughput.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'll kind of just pile on from a slightly different perspective. So I think it's important to define what we mean by momentum, right?
Mhm.
And so it's momentum towards something, right? And so we need to know what the something is. And so at the traction lab, for example, like part of the way we approach this idea of traction science is that we think about a milestone that's at least 6 months out. Oftentimes it's a fundraising milestone, and we say, what does the company have to look like at that particular point in order for us to be able to open that round, right? And then we reverse engineer from then to today and say, okay, so here are the major gaps, and here are the things that we need to de-risk, in this case for those investors, in order to be able to do that. And then based on those risks, we can tie those back to validation points, and that gives us a target to work towards. So we need one of our validation points is like, it could be related to go to market, for example. And so like we're working toward like a go and no go on our early go to market strategy. And so now we have a thing, and so our momentum is tied toward our learning velocity toward that validation point. So that's how I would think about that. Is that it's this learning velocity toward that, which means that you're measuring momentum in terms of the number of cycles, like experiment cycles that you actually
Mhm.
have. And so if you're not running experiment cycles, you don't have momentum. You have there's activity, but there's really not momentum, because we don't know if we're moving into the right direction, and we don't know how fast we're doing that. So all that's just sort of generic. And like there's this idea of like speed, above all else. And speed is really important, but speed without direction doesn't get you anywhere. Right? Speed without direction is just a recipe for ending up in the like for burning all of your cash and burning all of your time, and ending up in a place like with one of our earlier questions where we're asking like, is this good or bad? I don't know. Where are we right now? So I would keep a lot of those things in mind as you do that, and again go back to this idea of like what we're trying to do is how like our validated learning velocity. So we're running all these experiments, so we're getting data back, and is that data validating or invalidating? Right. And so the more validated learning that we get, the higher our validated learning velocity, and therefore the more momentum that we actually have down that path. But it all starts with us saying, here's where we think we're going to go. Here's what we need to look like at that point in time. And therefore, here's the experiments we're going to run right now that build toward that overall goal.
Yeah, I think the like biggest thing I would add is also the learning is tied to also like validation, and that we're trying to validate specific risk related to our venture. And so as we're thinking about those validation points, it's ultimately trying to identify like what are those riskiest components, and we need to see in order to understand what our risk gap is. We have to know where we're going, where we're at today, with like a realistic look in the mirror, not like, oh, this is where we think we are. Like, this is actually what we look like to be that investable company. And then what are those major risks that I actually need to go get evidence related to along this validation learning pathway? So I love it.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Well, I think we got some comment activity in the chat, but it doesn't look like any new questions. So we'll give it a few more seconds in case anybody wants to drop something in there. But otherwise, we'll sort of round things up here while we're giving everybody a last chance to get their question in. Let's look forward. So next week, we'll of course have an episode of Zero to Traction. No idea what we're going to talk about yet. If you've got
Yeah,
requests, let us
yeah. Let
know.
us know. Comment. Let us know what you want to hear.
Yeah, love work. We do it based on the questions that we're
We do it on
hearing.
vibes. We do it on
And
vibes.
We in fact do look at the data and to see like this worked, this didn't work. We've actually been experimenting with the time that we release the podcast, so that's a thing too as we try to make progress on that. We will also we'll have office hours again next week, probably same time, same place, but we'll keep you guys posted on that. In the meantime, get the questions, keep those questions coming in. We do have applications open right now for our next form of the Traction Lab. We have 2 active fora right now that are sort of in the wrapping up the evaluative stages and in the will they, won't they into our incubation stage. So super exciting, and we're gonna open up a new one soon. So if you want to figure out how you get this traction science stuff applied to your venture backable startup, fill out an application. Let's chat.
We'll see you next week, Dennis. We're gonna get some spicy questions, so we'll I'll bring my glass of milk just to see if I can handle the spice, but nonetheless, looking forward to it. And thank you all for hopping in and engaging in the chat, asking your questions. Check out Fuel or Fool, our latest drop today for Zero to Traction. And then also we'll be dropping another next week, and we'll be right back here and looking forward to those zinging hot questions. So.
Yeah, it looks like we have a request for next week to talk a little bit about the topic of women in startups. That's a pretty big topic, but more than happy to engage in it. Feel free to drop a comment for is there a particular trend or concern or question or comment or just thing of interest that's within that space. And these 2 white guys would we be happy to talk about women in startups, or maybe we'll bring in a credible friend in as well for that conversation. So let us know what you want to know. We'll be happy to do it.
I love it. All right. Well, with that, thank you, JDM, for the time and fun as always. Thank you all for hopping in, and we hope to be in your ear next week in Zero to Traction, and hope to be visually in front of you at the office hours. So see you then. Bye.
Peace. Bye.